A bit of a stormy sky looking from the southwest to the northwest there from the drone, hanging over a little elementary school there and a couple of athletic fields, and looked like a little bit of a shower going off that way about 10 or 15 miles out. So we are developing a little bit of instability in this area. Welcome to the Meteorology Lab. Let's check it out. We've got quite a bit of weather for this weekend, and here's the first piece of it. Unusually strong Arctic high pressure moving southward. This is probably about a 1045 millibar high. I don't know if that data there is accurate, but let's check out the temperatures in there. It's probably going to be a little tough to read there, but we can see temperatures. This is kind of unusual in southern Nunavut, which is just south of the Arctic Circle. Below zero with blizzard conditions, winds gusting up to almost 40 knots. This is blizzards do happen along the West Hudson Bay coast from time to time. I don't see them too often with that kind of strength, so this is really some strong energy coming southward. We've got temperatures in the teens and single digits and teens in the Canadian prairies, and some of it is heading into Alaska. And typically what happens is there's blocking from the Brooks Range and the Rockies. They kind of follow this line here, and that tends to protect Fairbanks and the inland areas from the worst of it. Now, they do get Arctic air, but typically that develops from radiational cooling, not from advection like you see here. But in this case, yeah, they are getting some advection of some pretty cold air. Temperatures probably a little bit mild for that area, but the brunt of the cold air is sort of heading east there. Let's check it out down on the lower 48 there. We've got a pretty classic Alberta Clipper coming southward through Des Moines, Omaha, down to Salina and to Denver. So the cold air is starting to enter the northern plains there. Let's check out the plots, and I'm going to turn down the crowding a little bit so we can see the data a little bit better. So at this point, the temperatures are not too bad coming out of North Dakota there, but they are pretty gusty. And down to the south, you can see the very mild conditions. We don't quite have the return of tropical moisture coming off the Gulf. Just a little sliver of 60s coming into South Texas, but we are in that feed of moisture flowing northward, and that's what we were seeing on that drone footage there. That's pretty much just sampling the core of the moisture return. If we had stronger pressure falls out in Colorado and New Mexico, we would probably have much higher dew points and maybe be looking at some severe weather potential. Now, California also is mostly under a tropical air mass, but they're getting the Pineapple Express coming off the Pacific, and we'll check that out in a bit. But the rain is entering that region. It's a good idea to also look at the steering flow and the jet stream configuration and the thermal setup. Looks like we've got a fairly simple pattern. Polar front jet coming out of Canada there, coming up in the Canadian Maritimes. Very large Hudson Bay vortex. What was that I said? Hudson Bay vortex right there. However, the ridging out west is not quite as intense as we typically see with these systems, so the Pacific is kind of open, as you can see there, and that's helping to bring that Pineapple Express into California and Nevada. Okay, another way we can look at this is with the thickness and isobars, and in this case what I've done is I've used the 1000 through 850 millibar thickness, which gives us a look at the thermal structure between the surface and 500 or 5,000 feet. Now, one issue with that is that this is relative to sea level, so we're looking at 0 through 5,000 MSL, which means we don't have very good sampling in the Rockies, so we got to keep that in mind there. But just a quick look. There's that front coming in through Iowa, the coldest air up in the Canadian prairies. And then we can also look for ridging, thermal ridging, that would help identify some of the tropical air. Looks like there's a little bit there in California. See that? It's difficult to pick that out because the noisy field there that we typically see over the Rockies, but we do kind of make out that thermal trough definitely. And it looks like another one in the high plains of New Mexico and Colorado there. So that delineates where the tropical air mass is. And other than that, we've just got the old receding high pressure on the east coast right there. And north of that, we've got the cold air advection pushing cold air off the New England coast and the Maritimes there. And on the other side, as you might imagine, that's where we have the warm air advection. But the strongest feed is in Texas and Oklahoma. So those clouds we were seeing earlier, there's going to be a little bit of music, but I'm just going to pop this up real quick. It's not showing it. But anyway, you remember what we were seeing when we started out, that stratocumulus layer overcast. That is some of that tropical moisture flowing northward. And let's see if we can sample that on the SCU-T. See if our evening SCU-Ts are in. Already up to April 6th. This month is really flying by. Okay, forward sounding for this evening looking like this. Loaded gun. Pretty classic there. So if we did have deep cyclogenesis out to the west, that kind of confirms that we would be looking at probably some severe weather. Got the lapse rates pretty steep there from about 7,000 up to about 16,000 feet. A little bit of a Cape robber up at about 20,000. But down here you can see the tropical moisture. Low 50s dew points through a very deep layer up to about 6,000 feet. And this layer here is where we've got the stratocumulus. And what it's doing is it's rising and it's kind of spreading underneath that inversion. Because above that, that's dry air. See that right there? That's dry, low relative humidities. So if you were in an airplane, you would see the cloud down at this level. And below it, a little bit of haze, since the relative humidity is fairly high underneath that cloud. So that's conducive to haze formation. And above that, pretty clear, except for a little bit of cirrus above that. So this kind of ties together what you see visually and on the charts and on the big picture there. Okay, let's move to the chart, the chat there, and I'm going to put this up real quick. And let me see how things are going, make sure the microphone and everything is working. Looks good there. Shirley Keast joining us, 25 in Michigan. Had some snowfall today there. Hitting the road for Minneapolis. Fun with Tech is here with Alexi Pinkerson-Walsh and David Holcomb there. Meg and John reporting 31 in Minnesota. We have Mike Wan here and Jenny C. from Milwaukee. David Moore is reporting a windy day in the Metroplex today. Dew points in the upper 50s. Looks like a low developing east of Lubbock. That would be on the Cap Rock there. Mike R. out there in San Francisco says rain is starting to fall out there. Beginning of the Pineapple Express, 3 to 5 inches expected locally, but very high snow levels. And that kind of follows with the thickness chart. If I can go back to that. Because as you can see, they're not linked up with this cold air that's coming down out of Canada. So out there in California, Nevada, Oregon, that's purely tropical air. Maybe we can take a look at that and compare that. I really wish we had a sounding from Fresno and Red Bluff. That would be pretty convenient. But we're going to have to look at Oakland, which is across the bay from San Francisco, and they're looking like this here. Already getting saturation in that sounding. You can see that there. And this shows how a lot of the precipitation fields with these systems coming on shore, they tend to develop there in the mid-levels. So this is between 10 and 15,000 feet there. And there's also a little bit of moisture in the lower levels. Looks like upper 40s dew points. But you can see the temperature trace on the right here. That's fairly warm. Looking at about 60 right there at the surface, and then if you bring any of this down, you're looking at 70s temperatures, and the tropopause is up very high. So pretty classic tropical sounding, and it looks like Edwards might be available. Edwards Air Force Base, no, that's not there. Okay. Let me try Las Vegas, which is going to be in southern Nevada there. So that's showing the inverted V sounding. Looks like a little bit of moisture in there, 15 to 20,000 feet, and very, very warm profile there. Strong lapse rate in the lowest 10,000 feet, and that goes all the way down to a temperature of about 85, 86 degrees. And then to give you another way of comparing this, we can head up to the core of the cold air mass. We'll go up to Manitoba, just north of Winnipeg. And you can see how far to the left this trace is, and you can see a lot of modification going on in that air mass. So this had the potential to be quite a bit colder, but we're seeing temperatures there in the single digits Fahrenheit. But you can see the potential there for that to be much colder without all that modification going on. Very low tropopause, all the way down to about 24,000 feet there, and above that this is all stratosphere. Very gusty winds coming out of the north there. Quite a northerly component, so very dynamic weather pattern going on. We can go back to the water vapor imagery, and looks like we got a shortwave moving into Texas. I'm calling this a shortwave because it's got kind of an S shape on the backside there. On the backside looks like there's drying. So that's indicating kind of like a couplet of vertical motion. The down motion is here and the up motion is over here. So we might see a reflection of that somewhere on the vorticity charts. And then if we go out further west, you can see the moisture out there in California. Now, because of the low satellite angle way out here on the west coast, the returns back to the satellite are going to look kind of cold. So if we switch over to the west satellite, we get a little bit different picture there. It doesn't look quite so intense as far as precip, but that is definitely quite a feed of moisture. That's that Pineapple Express there, heading straight into California, and this looks like one of the Bear Clinic systems there right offshore. So a lot of bands coming inland, and we'll check out those precipitable water amounts in a little bit. Okay, so what does that leave us with? Let's see, we've gone over the upper air, the thickness. Let me check my tabs here. I guess we can start doing a little preview with NAM. Remember these things? Let's take a look at the southwestern U.S. and see what it has for that area. Okay, we're looking strictly at winds and temperatures, so this may not show the precip field too much, unless there's like updrafts. You might see some bubbly texture in here if there's convective updrafts. But let's roll this forward and see what we got here. Okay, there's the warm-up this evening. So this is going to be about right now. Looks like some very warm temperatures around Bakersfield and Fresno, up in the 80s. Up to the north, cooler air, probably catching some of that evaporative cooling there in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm sure it's going to be a different picture tomorrow or the next day. You can see those strong winds coming on shore there. Looks cooler tomorrow, 70s in the South Valley and 50s up north. And this is probably about when that rain is coming down right back here. And then after that point, I'm not too sure what's happening after that. We'll have to look at the models for that. As far as where the front is, towards the end of the period, 48 hours out, I can see the northwesterly flow working down the coast. So between that and today's chart, where they're southwesterly, there's been a frontal passage. So let me see if I can find that. Moving forward, and yeah, somewhere right in here there's a change. That looks like the cold front. This is Saturday morning, around 2 to 3 a.m. local. So I think that's that Pacific front coming in inland. Then after that, it's just going to work down the valley. You can see the winds turn southwest or northwesterly there. And next stop, Los Angeles and San Diego. Looks like some very warm temperatures. Adiabatic warming out ahead of that front. Strong westerlies and temperatures up near 90 out in the deserts. And then at some point the cold air rolls in. So it looks very stormy there for Saturday in the Mojave Desert and southern Nevada. Okay. And that brings us to the southern plains. I guess we can look at the central plains. We don't have too many viewers up there, but we can watch the cold air roll down. There's the leading edge right now. This might give us an idea how deep the air is. We can see whether it crosses the Rockies or just gets banked up like that. So we'll see what happens here. Okay, the cold air flows down. This is tomorrow morning. The purples up there are going to be single-digit temperatures. And the little white line you see here, that's the freeze line. So by Friday evening, that front is already all the way down in Texas. And I can see upslope flow there in Colorado. The air is trying to cross the front range. But the true test is what happens Saturday and Sunday. Now I can see out there in the Intermountain region, I don't see much wind flow, kind of light and variable there. So it looks like there's nothing really repelling this cold air mass. So what's happening is it looks like it's just getting stuck against the front range. I guess it doesn't have very much depth there. And towards Saturday, it looks like it starts eroding there around. See that? Some warm air breaking out. That looks like that's going to be around Trinidad. And this is right around the Palmer Divide. So I guess there's probably some very strong heating acting on that and helping to mix out that cold air. And then that brings us to Texas. Cold air coming south. There it is, showing up in Wichita tomorrow morning. And then by afternoon, this is really where you see something interesting. Yeah, right here. See the strong downslope flow developing ahead of that front. Flows out of the west, and you see the temperatures there at San Angelo, 94. 90 at Brownwood, 88 at Abilene, 90 at Fort Stockton, 87 at Lubbock. So this is some very warm temperatures. And then just up to the north at the very same instant, 30 in Dodge City, 32 at Ulysses there. So yeah, here comes that cold air, and that's going to really change things for Saturday. You can also see what looks like a little bit of a wave developing in East Texas. So you got to kind of watch that along the fronts. If there's severe weather expected, those waves can be pretty significant since they do influence the low-level wind field. But that low doesn't really have much of a chance to get going. I guess once it hits that warm Gulf water, it probably will start developing there in a hurry. But wow, look at this. For 18Z Saturday, this is 1 p.m., we're showing sub-freezing markings on the map around Wichita Falls and Seymour. So you may be wondering, how is this unprecedented? Well, I went into my Argon program. If you want to see what that is, you can go to weathergraphics.com/Argon. That's a huge weather database, and I can just sit there and I can constrain a search of, you know, what's the lowest maximum temperature that's ever happened between April 1st and April 15th, and that's what I did, and here's the result. Let me get this centered here. Okay, so I pulled this up about half an hour ago. These were the coldest outbreaks I was able to find, and one thing that I did was that I was careful about was to use the maximum temperature and not the minimum. Because with a minimum, all you need is good radiational cooling or a little bit of snow on the ground. That can influence how strong the inversion is, but not truly represent how frigid the air mass itself is. Max temperature, that's a much, I think, more significant indicator of air mass, the coldness of the air mass. So you see these dates here. These are the coldest outbreaks I was able to find in Wichita, Kansas, Oklahoma City, DFW, and Houston. It looks like 1957 was the strongest, and let me show you that one. This is April 12, 1957. Looks like a very similar pattern, doesn't it? This is 1:30 in the morning at that time, or on that date, and we had 64 there at Waco. So it was probably in the 70s earlier that day. And then up to the north, 20s and 30s in Kansas and Oklahoma. And let me see what other data is on here. There might... Yeah, these are the high and low temperatures. Let me see if I can zoom in on that. However, this is probably going to be for the previous day. But it'll give you some idea, you know, how warm it was in Texas. 76 up to 82. And then up north, 20s for highs and lows near zero. And then the upper level pattern that would be interesting to look at. Looks like this might be a little bit of a Hudson Bay vortex that has shifted south a bit, because you can see we've got these high heights up in northern Canada. So this looks like kind of a smaller outbreak, like a little bit more compact, and then all that is associated with that cold air. And again, we're looking at 1957 here at that outbreak. So if you want to check these out, you can run the webcast back when it posts in about an hour, and then you can go to let me see if I have the link for that. You would put in NOAA Docs Daily Weather Map. That'll bring up that site right there. It's Daily Weather Maps at NOAA Central Library. And you'll need the Deja Vu plugin, and you just basically pick your dates, and you can look at those and compare that situation to this week's. Okay, let's look at the forecast, starting out with the west coast. We're going to look at the high resolution rapid refresh. And this will show us the system coming inland there in Northern California. Showers coming through San Francisco, Stockton, Marysville, Sacramento. And then it looks like maybe a bit of a shortwave moving across Friday morning. Right around the morning commute there, hitting San Francisco pretty hard, and then that'll cross over into Nevada. Let's look at the precipitable water and see how that looks. Right now, looks like about an inch. This is 1 inch. The purples are going to be 2 inches. And this is hour by hour. You can see the 2 inches. Those make it in tonight around 3 or 4 in the morning. So this is when the rain is really going to get going. And I don't really see an end to that. We're going to have to look at the GFS to see where that Pineapple Express ends. But it's definitely looking wet there. Then for Texas, let's look at that and see how things shape up. This is the NAM. So we're looking at tomorrow here. This is tomorrow about 4 p.m. and you can see the high temperatures there around San Angelo. And then 24 hours later, pretty much everybody's in the 40s. But since it's April, the sun angle is pretty high. That air mass is going to erode pretty quick, but not before we get some 20s and low 30s. And then you can see we've got a very rapid warm-up. Sunday, already back in the 90s. So these are these crazy temperature swings you hear about in Texas. Okay, let's look at the big picture, and I think what I'll do is look at the precipitable water. Okay, starting out, this is how the chart looks right now. And looks like Texas is actually getting some decent precipitable water, about 1.5 inches there, so we may have to watch for a few showers tomorrow. Anytime the moisture comes up like that with a front coming south, that means we need to keep an eye on that. Lots of 2-inch precipitable waters coming into California, pretty much all the way up and down the coast from Los Angeles up to Arcata. And here comes the backside, drying on Saturday morning. So that's when things will start improving from northwest to southeast. Some of that moisture does make it into Arizona on Sunday. And then with that outgoing system in Texas, we're going to get on the backside and get that return flow coming up. And that's going to bring that moisture right back up north, because this is not an outbreak that's going to clear the Gulf of moisture. It's just going to kind of shove it out a little bit offshore and then bring it right back north. So we're going to be looking at the chance for precip pretty quickly next week. And yeah, okay, there comes some 2 inches coming in for Tuesday. But another front moves in, and we'll just put that together on the this chart here that we normally use. Let me get that centered. Zoom that out a little bit. Okay, we'll go and roll our forecast in just a minute. Let me just check the chat and see what's going on in there. Pretty good crowd, and something I wanted to mention, I guess while I have you all here, feel free to send photos. If you see any interesting weather, you can email that, and the best place for that is probably going to be, we've been changing our email around because I got some help with the business, and I'm only seeing about half of the email boxes, but the one you should probably use is tim.vasquez, V-A-S-Q-U-E-Z, at weathergraphics.com, or you can use MISC, as in miscellaneous, MISC, at weathergraphics.com. And you can send your photo. Make sure you specify that I have permission to use it and that it's yours. And if I get it a couple of hours before the webcast, I may be able to use it any day between now and whenever. But I'm not always going to be able to check the email, so don't be surprised if you don't hear back, because sometimes I just don't get around to the email. But if you have time and feel like sending it, please do. So there's the cold air mass coming south, rapidly surging southward through the plains, and looks like the showers do break out in eastern Oklahoma with the afternoon heating there. And then later during the day, looks like, yeah, there's our convective maximum. I don't think there's going to be too much severe with this, because typically with these very strong cold air masses, any severe cells that are rotating, they tend to be undercut very quickly, and that just shuts them down. You can get some very brief spin-ups and that kind of thing, but you can see that a lot of the precip is probably going to be back behind the front. So this is kind of acting as an anti-front. Out over Mississippi and Louisiana, that could be different. There could be some isolated cells developing. You see that onshore flow coming up from the south. That's the zone ahead of the front where we might have to keep an eye on things. And then for tomorrow night, the front continues surging south, possibly some scattered severe breaking out Mississippi and Alabama. And then as the day goes on Saturday, things move eastward pretty quickly. And this is the convective maximum for Saturday. Pretty much everything is offshore except around Jacksonville and Savannah and off the Charleston coast there. One day of cold air across the plains, and then it's going to start eroding from west to east pretty quickly. And out to the west we can see low pressure system trying to cross the Rockies. That's that system coming from California there, moving west to east, coming across this cold air. So we'll see what happens with that. We see some pressure falls there in the Texas Panhandle for Sunday. Looks like that warm front is starting to come north. And this is the Pacific front back here. However, there's not a whole lot of moisture to work with. We don't quite have the deep feed coming in just yet. We'll have to wait a day or two for that. So it's just going to be kind of a warm and somewhat dry day there in Texas, and not much moisture to work with for that warm front. Looks like most of that energy rides over the cold dome. So the system from California is already crossing the Midwest there. A little bit of a reflection there at the surface, and looks like a new Alberta clipper coming south. And there it comes, some more cold air coming southward for Tuesday. And I do remember that on Tuesday there was those very high precipitable waters, so we're going to have to keep an eye out for overrunning. Looks like we kind of luck out, and most of that stays to the south in Texas. But here's some more cold air. And then going into midweek, looks pretty quiet. A couple of Pacific systems moving across the northern Rockies. This one gets going in Illinois on Thursday. Chance of severe there on the 12th on Thursday. And then looks like a deeper system coming in. That's pretty well developed there. However, it looks like, let's see, 6E. Yeah, it looks like we have just enough moisture to get stuff going along that front. Probably have an active dry line also. So Friday we may be looking at a chance of severe along and east of I-35. And then that will move eastward into the Mississippi River region for the following Saturday. So this is definitely a Pacific front, but it is bringing a little bit of Canadian air back in behind. This air here, this came mostly from the Great Basin and the Pacific. So not quite as severe there. Then I think at this point it's anybody's guess. This is a very dynamic pattern. So anything this far out for the 16th, 17th, 250 hours, that's really going to be too far out to really call that accurately. The big scale, the large scale patterns, however, will probably be accurate. You can see we're bringing in another blob of cold air, and I can see high pressure up to the north, so it looks like that Hudson Bay vortex will still be active. Down to the south, looks like another Pacific system coming in, so another chance of severe for the Midwest on the 19th. And that's probably about as far as we can go with these products. So let me take one last look at chat, see how things are going there. See, we got Adam Davis here. Megan John's mentioning that Minnesotans are getting sick of the snow. And yeah, I did see about a week from now the models were trying to bring in a little bit of a mini blizzard. Let me see if I can bring that. Yeah, no, not that one. It's a little further up. Yeah, this one right here. This is 200 hours out, so take this with a grain of salt, but this is that sector where we have the wraparound. That can be a potential area for blizzard conditions, so we'll just have to kind of watch that. Again, we're looking at Friday and Saturday, the 13th and 14th for that. Okay, Christian Flock, Yukon, Oklahoma, 67 and calm. Winter precip Friday night or Saturday. I don't know, I forgot to look at that. Let's see if I can bring that up real quick. This far out, about all I can really do is go with the models, and I would probably want to compare them also. But let's see what we got here for the NAM. Yeah, mixed phase precip with snow around the Blackwell, Tulsa area. Yeah, looks like the snow line's right about there. And this is interesting. Mixed precip all the way down to the Red River. Anywhere from Seymour to Jacksboro, McKinney. I'm really splitting hairs here, but in any case, anywhere along or north of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, maybe some possibilities there for Friday night. But as you can see, it's not very organized. That's because of the very strong drying coming in from the surface upward. So there's going to be a lot of Virgo with this, and not all of it is going to reach the ground. And by this point, it's still going to be cloudy, precip trying to come down, but it's not making it down to the surface there. So that's one of the things about these very strong cold outbreaks. They do tend to interfere with precip and freezing rain, sleet, and all that coming down. However, this precip field also adds to the punch of the cold air because of evaporative cooling. It's basically producing a large outflow area. So we would probably be about 15 degrees warmer or so if we didn't have all this precip. So it's not only coming from Canada, but it is also being generated dynamically by the precip field. Okay, Mike Estwick there says audio is 5x5. Mike Bexley, crazy weather the last couple of days in central Oklahoma, or central Ohio, yeah, I'd imagine. Storm spotter apex, severe weather potential tomorrow. Yeah, that's mostly going to be east of I-35, maybe towards Arkansas and Fort Smith. Everything from a tornado, snow, 70-degree temperatures, typical Ohio weather. Greg Kerner joining us. Alexander Woods. Yeah, this is pretty much a blue norther. For me, the litmus test of a true blue norther is where you see the Arcus cloud along the front, and I've only seen that a couple times with very strong surges of cold air coming south. But yeah, you'll look to the north and the horizon will be kind of like a dark blue or grayish, and you'll kind of see this dark wall coming at you from the north, and it gets closer and closer over the span of an hour. And depending on how dry the soil is, there can actually be blowing dust back behind those fronts. And a lot of those pictures you might have seen of the dust bowl, like out in this area here, a lot of those pictures were taken along fronts like what we're seeing coming south, like this right here. That would be a prime candidate there for a dust bowl photo. As soon as that front passes, you get that Arcus cloud, the dust being lifted along the leading edge of that cold front, and you can see some really impressive pictures with that. Maybe I'll pull one up real quick here. Yeah, there you go. Most of these, if you pull them up and look at the dates, they're associated with the arrival of a cold front surging south. And eventually that dust settles out over several hours. But yeah, that's a whole story in itself. The land was overcultivated, and the topsoil was... They had incentives to move farmers out there to work the land there in the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle, and northward. And obviously the farming practices were not the best. So a lot of the topsoil ended up being advected eastward back towards Missouri and Arkansas. Okay, that's about it. Adam Davis asks, can you take video files? Yeah, you can. I would ask that you don't email large videos that are over, like 10 megs, because I may not be able to get to those. You may want to put that on a host or on YouTube. Just make sure you include the permission. Mike R. says, Yosemite closed for flooding concerns. And everybody's saying goodnight there. And I think I'll do the same. So I hope you enjoy the weathercast. And let me get that music going. And we'll talk to you tomorrow with that front coming southward. And that's about all I got for tonight. Have a good evening, and we will see you then. Bye-bye.